So yesterday, we had the good fortune of having Tuna moderate our sessions. But now, we're very proud to have his former boss, the big fish, General Paul Nakasone, with us. So we had the privilege of hearing from the General at last year's summit, and it is our distinct honor to welcome him back this year. In May 2008, General Paul Nakasone assumed his present duties as Commander, U.S. Cyber Command, Director, National Security Agency Chief, Central Security Service. He previously led U.S. Army Cyber Command from 2016 to 2018, and he has held command and staff positions across all levels of the Army with assignments in the United States, the Republic of Korea, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Please welcome General Paul Nakasone.
Good afternoon, and it's so nice to be here. You know, I'm honored to be back to participate in this ongoing dialogue on modern conflict and emerging threats. Although it strikes me that last year I was asked to give the opening keynote. I suspect the decision was made this year to shift me toward the end, lest I perhaps scare away the audience. And Chancellor Dearmar, I did write this morning that you're pleased but not satisfied with this year's summit. But I would tell you that anyone that can bring Taylor Swift as the closing act for the second day of the summit, impressive. And so your staff will have quite a high bar next year to obviously meet. To my friends and colleagues, many of you who spoke yesterday, those that spoke today, again, I just would share with you how impressed that I am just having served with you and what you've done and what you continue to do in the security of our nation. Thank you so much. So today I'm also struck that holding this summit at Vanderbilt University makes perfect sense. As you well know, this institution arose from a vision of a man who helped build modern America. Commodore Vanderbilt did as much as anyone to transform our transportation system, applying steam power on land and sea to knit this vast country together, despite its long distances and geographic barriers. He helped make it a great nation, and he helped it to keep it one. His railroads and steamboats provided a crucial advantage for the Union in the Civil War. He even provided a very powerful ship to the United States Navy. After the war, Vanderbilt's commitment to healing the wounds of that conflict became more deeply personal. He married a Southern woman who helped persuade him to donate $1 million, a huge sum in 1873, to found this great university in Tennessee, which a decade earlier had carried arms against the United States. Let his example remind us that conflict must not be eternal, and that we prepare for and wage war with the object of building a better peace. So before we can effectively discuss modern conflict and what actions we must take, we have to establish the strategic context. What got us here? What lessons have we learned? Most importantly, is warfare changing, or has it already changed? Last year's summit focused by design and good fortune on the importance of partnerships. In fact, let me start with my closing point from last year. Partnerships provide us the power that ensures success in this changing character of conflict. That theme still applies. As we see daily in Ukraine, conflict today is never one-on-one, even when only two powers do the actual fighting. Modern conflict is coalition on coalition. And coalition partners today can include other states, alliances, corporations, non-governmental organizations, media outlets, civil society activists, and even criminal opportunists. Indeed, all are shaping what will be the outcome of the conflict in Ukraine. We see this lesson reinforced for us in every action we take. And as I reflect on what it takes to sustain effectiveness at scale in cyberspace, I note that we must do so with partners. The cyber domain in particular demands it. True collaboration is built on understanding your own competitive advantages as well as those of your partners. In our case, here is where the missions of U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency take on such importance for the nation's security, prosperity, and interests. NSA is the largest component of the U.S. intelligence community, and it works two main missions. Put simply, NSA makes code, and it breaks code. Its foreign intelligence collection and processing capabilities are unparalleled. We at NSA, working with our allies and partners, produce critical intelligence that informs national leaders, commanders, and planners. The nation's decision makers, both civilian and uniformed, as well as the intelligence community itself, depend on the bedrock knowledge that we create at NSA. They also depend on NSA to collect intelligence in ways that respect the constitutionally guaranteed rights to privacy and civil liberties of our fellow citizens. I'm proud to say that NSA remains worthy of that trust. NSA's traditional code-making mission, as Major General Malik highlighted yesterday, to protect military and leadership communications, has evolved into a cybersecurity mission on behalf of the nation. We still help protect the integrity of national security systems and the data they process. But today, we also work with federal, law enforcement, intelligence, and industry partners, and allies as well, to ensure that the insights we glean from intelligence and innovation quickly feed back into the cybersecurity ecosystem. That now includes military networks, national security systems, and the defense industrial base. In addition, when appropriate, we look for opportunities to share more broadly with other partners, such as those in industry and academia, to make them tougher targets for adversaries, and to make it so malicious cyber actors, whoever they are, find fewer victims. They should feel the hand of law enforcement and the eye of public exposure follow them wherever they go. They cannot hide, and they should live in fear of lawful apprehension. Part of that enduring mission is carried out by U.S. Cyber Command. The command performs three missions. As a warfighting command, one of the 11 unified commands executing the orders of the President and the Secretary of Defense. The command secures, operates, and defends the Department of Defense Information Network, what we call the DODIN, reaching from the Pentagon all the way to the tactical edge of nearly every continent. This surface area comprises more than 15,000 classified, unclassified, and special purpose networks with 4 million DoD computers, plus 145,000 mobility devices. Defending the DODIN alone is an enormous task, and it's one in which we daily confront some of the world's most advanced cyber actors as they seek to access to our data and networks. U.S. Cyber Command supports the Joint Force, ensuring my counterpart combatant commanders have the capacity and capabilities to perform their missions and execute presidentially directed operations. For instance, we are closely and constantly working with U.S. European Command, as General Todd Walters spoke to yesterday, U.S. Indo-PACOM, U.S. Central Command, U.S. Africa Command, and U.S. Special Operations Command to steady the defenses of our allies and pursue ISIS, the remnants of al-Qaeda and other violent extremist groups in Africa and Asia. The command, in its third mission, defends the nation in cyberspace against attacks of significant consequences. Here we help to ensure that no federal agency or partner is left to defend itself alone against the military intelligence services of our adversaries. We enable and act, helping our domestic agency partners defend critical infrastructure and democratic processes, as well as to bring justice to criminal actors who employ cyber means to attack them. These two organizations that I head are separate and distinct, and yet the synergy between their capabilities is truly remarkable. I see it every day in the spirit of innovation pervading both the agency and command, in the can-do attitudes of its leaders and its workforce, in the long hours they devote to their missions, in the readiness of our allies and other agencies to which we partner. Their continual alignment under one commander benefits both the agency and command, and most importantly, serves our nation most effectively. I'm convinced that that alignment has been crucial to our robust responses to events as a series of actors have grown in boldness and sophistication in their efforts to undermine U.S. interests and to intimidate those who oppose their autocratic designs. So let us examine the strategic environment in recent years. The pace of cyber activity has rapidly accelerated. The scope, scale, and sophistication of our adversaries is increasing quickly as well. and therefore we lack the luxury of surging resources against any one problem for too long. In addition, as I noted earlier, we also find ourselves in a domain in which whichever more consequential elements of society beyond just the public sector can shape hostilities or directly influence conditions that affect our success or failure in competition, crisis, or conflict. These actors can be global corporations monitoring millions of endpoints. They might be service providers of all kinds, offering everything from bandwidth to data sets to smart contracts for surveillance tools. They might be loosely organized groups like the IT Army in Ukraine, or criminal enterprises more or less affiliated with state military or intelligence agencies. Or they might be capable individuals inspired by patriotism or driven by grievance. The environment creates great complexity and ambiguity in decision-making. We do not, and indeed cannot, control all the players in the cyber domain. No country can, despite prodigious efforts to do so by certain states. We can only participate in the information environment, albeit as a major player. I'm convinced that the winners of future competitions and conflicts will be those coalitions that can set conditions for dynamic collaboration with speed across a broad section of societies, regions, and sectors, fostering mutual understanding and congruent action. Such understanding and action require a foundation of trust between the public sector and our society, and across our allies and private sector partners. Our purposes and interests do not have to align perfectly, but we and our partners must be able to see where they do match up, and we must also have the ability and agility to move when a confluence occurs. Outmaneuvering adversaries in the strategic environment that I just described requires special efforts. Authorities, policies, and strategies must be complementary and mutually supporting. Barriers to collaboration must be removed and institutions incentivized to work together. Finally, unity of effort must prevail in the overall management and application of resources. First, services, agencies, and forces require clear guidance regarding what they are to accomplish and how they are to do so. In our case, there has been a few notable advancements. The Department of Defense's 2018 cyber strategy made great strides in moving us from a reactive to a proactive posture with the introduction of Defend Forward and our operating model, now known as persistent engagement. This, coupled with the issuance of National Security Policy Memorandum 13, which streamlined the approval process for cyber operations, and the National Defense Authorization Act for FY19, which clarified the status of clandestine military activities in cyberspace. Second, removing barriers and incentivizing collaboration means learning to work together, not by exception, but by default. That entails sharing data, insights, and intelligence as broadly and as fast as possible so that leaders and commanders share a holistic view of the environment and can take action. We have seen what synergy across NSA and U.S. Cyber Command, partner with federal agencies, allies, and industry partners have accomplished in defense of our elections. That was demonstrated by the NSA U.S. Cyber Command Russia Small Group during the 2018 midterm elections, then by similarly constructed election security groups in 2020 and 2022. Together, we helped deliver safe and secure elections and sent a clear message to our adversaries. We will do what is required within our authority to defend the integrity of our election process. And third, unity of effort can be achieved only through integration of the different resourcing processes so that they work together to boost readiness and provide commanders with well-trained and well-equipped forces. The unity of effort comes directly from our legislated military service-like authorities, which centralizes control of manning, budget, and acquisition efforts. So returning to the theme of our conference, rapid changes in innovation and technology have turned modern conflict into a far-reaching global problem in ways we could have never imagined just a few years ago. If you take nothing else away from my talk today, it is this. Some may argue the character of warfare is about to fundamentally change. My perspective is that it already has changed. The changes are exhibited in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, the advancement of commercial technologies like generative artificial intelligence, the targeting of infrastructure, and the wide variety of actors. As a result, we must be deliberate in challenging our existing approaches and recognize that the way we previously looked to gain advantage in competition and address crisis and conflict may not be suited for the future. At U.S. Cyber Command, our response to the new character of warfare centers on improving agility, recognizing the power of information, intelligence, and influence, and enhancing the skills of our leaders. The rapid change in operations over the past 5 years provides proof that the famed cyber strategist, Yogi Berra, was correct. It's tough to make predictions, particularly about the future. Yet agility often balances rapid change, serving to mitigate future unforeseen contingencies or technological changes. We are increasing our agility through partnerships and authorities. Cybercom partnerships begin with the National Security Agency and quickly expand to CISA and FBI, key teammates in ensuring election security, homeland defense, counter-ransomware success, interagency partners like the Department of State and Treasury to apply economic and diplomatic levers of power, academia, the 100+ universities and military service colleges, part of Cyber Command's academic engagement network that provides us insights and contacts to the leading professors and students across our nation and our international partners. Over 22 countries we operate with, in, and through cyberspace, each offering different capabilities, capacities, and placement within this domain. A key partner for managing agility is the private sector. We learned this in early 2018 with our hunt forward operations and the use of a commercial partner to share suspected adversary malware and tradecraft. We learned this again in Ukraine in 2022 as the cybersecurity industry rapidly responded to requests from Kyiv, ensuring the safety of data, providing resilient architecture, and identifying known cyber threats. At U.S. Cyber Command, our link to the private sector is a program called Under Advisement. It represents a small nucleus of tech-savvy military members who engage daily with key industry partners, normally on a variety of open mediums. Born out of the SolarWinds intrusion in late 2020 and refined during Colonial Pipeline, Under Advisement is our canary in the coal mine. It provides insights from the private sector, shares information from our operations outside the United States, and are seen as value added to industry partners, given both Under Advisement gives and it gets. Agility is also enhanced by U.S. Cyber Command service-like authorities that I mentioned earlier. Similar to United States Special Operations Command, in recent years, Congress has prescribed service-like functions to U.S. Cyber Command. That means increasing U.S. Cyber Command's control over the manning, training, and equipping our cyber forces. Currently, U.S. Cyber Command has the authority for training, force provision, acquisition, and enhanced budget control. Why do service authorities improve our agility? They allow the command to respond rapidly to the changes in adversary tradecraft on the domain. More importantly, starting this October, U.S. Cyber Command will be responsible for the execution of nearly $3 billion annually for organizing, training, equipping, and sustaining our cyber forces. The U.S. Cyber Command commander, the person responsible for mission success, will now also control and prioritize the resources. Information advantage was keenly applied in the fall of 2021 in the lead up to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, when our intelligence community received approval to release accurate, timely information to allies in the media about Russia's intentions and capabilities as they mobilized for upcoming conflict. The ensuing international criticism of Moscow, I believe, ruined Russian plans to divide Ukraine from the West and the NATO countries. As our national security strategy noted, intelligence is an inherent national strength and one we must leverage. U.S. Cyber Command's own approach to the changing character of warfare incorporates a thorough knowledge of our adversary. We must understand them better than they understand themselves, whether applied in election defense or in battling ransomware actors. This foundational effort pays dividends and buys down surprise of rapid technological or tradecraft changes. For the past 2 months, both OpenAI's ChatGPT and Google's Bard, as we've just heard, have demonstrated convincingly the coming power of artificial intelligence and machine learning. tangible queries, and to provide rapid and many times rich responses at the fraction of the time. We see tremendous opportunity in our cyberspace efforts when coupled with artificial intelligence to rapidly discover, understand, and affect vulnerabilities. Conversely, as we heard this morning, we also see how generative AI might be used against us through high-quality content, such as text, graphics, and video, which can be created in a matter of seconds compared to the days or weeks required in the past. Our adversaries are looking for every angle to undermine trust with and among democratic nations. They target the trust between the government and the people and between different segments of society. U.S. Cyber Command will continue to look at the effectiveness of influence campaigns in the information environment, much as we view building resiliency within our own cyber terrain by mitigating and countering malign influence at the same time as we're building trust by sharing and exposing as much information as we can. Finally, our Cyber National Mission Force has conducted hunt forward operations since 2018, deploying a number of teams to 22 different countries. I often tell the story about a young Army captain with 4 to 5 years of experience leading a team of 20 conducting a hunt forward operation in Albania after our NATO ally had recently been attacked by Iranian cyber actors. We were invited by Albania, as we are with all hunt forward operations, to help governments understand and counter the threats. This captain guided the team to hunt and identify the adversary, shared his findings with our hosts to bolster the defenses of their network, and passed information back home so that we could improve our own defenses too. This is a true testament to the talent of our people. In fact, every great thing we do starts with people, the men and women of U.S. Cyber Command working with NSA and partners here and abroad. To put it another way, we win with people. People that can think critically across varied skill sets and use their talents as future leaders in service to the nation. Future leaders that come from places like Vanderbilt University, other ROTC programs, and military academies across the nation. Critical thinkers from engineering to English, computer science to classics majors who can examine a problem, determine the facts and assumptions that bound it, devise creative solutions to it, and then test and implement those solutions to mission success. The success of hunt forward operations and our entire force rests not with the technology we employ, but rather the talent of the leadership that guides them. It's this leadership that provides a ready answer to the changes in malware and adversary tradecraft. It is also the leaders who skillfully engage with a variety of partners. It is these leaders who set conditions for our future. In a 1963 essay by American author and futurist Alvin Toffler, he discussed the future as a way of life. He argued that the pace of technological change was accelerating so rapidly that the future was already here, and that individuals and society needed to adapt accordingly. Let me tell you, the future is now, and the character of war has already changed, and we must adapt accordingly. U.S. Cyber Command is adapting by improving our agility, harnessing the power of information, intelligence, and influence, and enhancing the skills of our leaders to ensure success. So today, let me thank Vanderbilt University and the organizers of this summit again for inviting me to address you. Symposiums like this are critical to bridging the gap between scholarship and practice, and to instructing a rising generation of leaders who will soon be building on today's lessons. I will leave you with this one final thought. You have heard topics of great importance to our nation discussed here for the past 2 days. Do not tune out that larger dialogue or let the conversations with your colleagues fade away when we part. Take the initiative to reach out, to share and to fashion new opportunities. Take the time to cultivate real connections with people and the organizations they represent. Get to know their competitive advantages and what they still need to be even more effective. Remember the fitting motto of Vanderbilt University, Cresce Raude, dare to grow. This is the only way we will be able to build and sustain effectiveness at scale for our nation. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General, for that inspiring talk. I have so many questions, and I know that others do too. If you can see that there's an email address up here, please do send some questions, and we'll try to get those in during our discussion. So, General, my first question is thinking a little bit about all of the things that we've covered during this conference. And the first thing that came to mind was the talk that General Walters gave yesterday about how important it was to be ready years in advance for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And he stressed the importance of teamwork and anticipatory supply chains. So given the dramatic changes you see in the world, and you talked a little bit about this, how might our teams of the future look? You said that we need to think in much more capacious, interdisciplinary ways, but could you expound a little bit more on that?
Yeah, and first, Todd Walters was a master at building a broad team, and he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for, I think, success in the early days and setting conditions for success today and Ukraine's ability to withstand this attack. I think our teams look tremendously different than they do today, right? So today I would describe our teams as being 80% military, 20% civilian, with contacts into a number of different agencies and industries. I think in the future, I think that there will be touch points to private sector that are much more broad. I think there'll be touch points to allies that are much more broad. I think that there will be a broader mix of talent and age groups on our team. Just because that's where we find the power. It's interesting in cyberspace, there's no one entity that has all the resources, has all the authorities, has all the capabilities to do what's needed. And so those that are most successful are those that can partner and partner quickly.
So how can a great university like Vanderbilt, I'm a little partial, help build supply chains for the future? For me as a professor, I would love to hear more about what I can be doing to be able to help your work.
I get asked this question quite frequently. How can we build more effective supply chains? How can we contribute to, developmental capabilities in the future? Here's the one way that Vanderbilt and other universities can help us the most, in my mind: build great critical thinkers. Great critical thinkers that I talked about in my speech, that can take a look at a very, very difficult problem, take that problem apart, look at the assumptions and facts that are built on that, and then offer, innovative solutions to it. If I might share a story here, the ability for us to do hunt forward operations was not some great, revelation that came from, the commander of U.S. Cyber Command or the director of NSA or anyone at that level. It came from, a young captain with a couple young NSA folks that were thinking about the problem. Says, I wonder how we can, provide problems to Russia in 2018 as they try to influence our elections. And that was from folks that can really think really well.
I was struck when I was reading your introduction. Gosh, it's been, 4 years and a day?
Well, 5 years and a day. But who's counting?
You know what? Yeah, that's true. That's a humanist thing. We always get in trouble for our math. Yes. So it's been 5 years and a day since you took your current position. So what is your job? How does it look different than it did 5 years ago?
In 2018, we were riveted on a midterm election that was coming up. And clearly it was thinking about how we were going to counteract the influence operations that we had seen in previous elections. I think one of the things that looks so dramatically different is just the terrain of this domain, right? Think about 2018 and think about 2021. What's 2021 like? We have SolarWinds, we have Microsoft Exchange, we have Colonial Pipeline, we have JBS, we have Kaseya, we have supply chain, we have zero-day vulnerabilities, we have ransomware, all in 9 months. And that's the period of time I think that there's an inflection point now that's like, okay, like cybersecurity, this is the nation's business. And that's, I think the partnerships that have been formed with CISA and FBI, the private sector, we're much better in 2023 than we were in 2018. But we're not where we need to be for the future, as I think all the panelists and speakers talked about today.
So there's a question from the audience. General Walters talked about the remarkable transparency of intelligence when the conflict began. As head of the NSA, could you share a little bit more about your approach to transparency?
I would love to. And I was just looking at John Darby, who used to head our director of operations, who was responsible for all the analysis and operations that that undergo in our agency. So it's the fall of 2021. And we know a tremendous amount about what Russia was going to do. And the determination was made that we should release this information. That's a sea change in terms of the way we approach, I think, the way we did business. But that had been seeded a couple years previous in terms of we had stood up a cybersecurity directorate in 2019. We started to think about how do we take more public credit for the work in the domain of cybersecurity. And then by 2021, saying, hey, we should release this information because this is going to cause a lot of problems. Here's what we learned. We could release the information. We could protect our sources and methods. We could help build a coalition, as I'm sure General Walters talked about yesterday. We could disrupt an adversary, as we talked about today. And we can empower a partner. There is, truth be told, there's a little bit of culture change there. And, I think that those that work at our agency would say that was a tremendous sea change in what we're going to do. But I think the work of leaders like John Darby and others that really reinforce to people, hey, these are not NSA's accesses, these are the nation's accesses. And if we're going to get to a better outcome with our national security, wouldn't we do that? And of course we would do that. And I think that is a bit of the definition of how we've changed in terms of the character of warfare as well.
So we have another question from the audience. Similar to preparation before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how is the U.S. DoD creating contingencies to combat cyber, logistical, and communication issues due to outages, shortages in modern tech we rely on so heavily?
I think this gets to the piece of resiliency. And one of the things that I take from watching Russia-Ukraine is on the 24th of February, the Russians conduct an offensive attack to take down Viasat, which is a satellite communications capability in Ukraine. And within 24 hours, Ukraine and Starlink have achieved an agreement, and Starlink is providing satellite communications across the country. I suspect the Russians never planned for that. And yet, there was a resiliency there, and there was a resilience in some of the other actions that Ukraine took to move data and to position their architecture in a different way to withstand what was going to occur. And I think that this has provided reinforcement to all of our thoughts that we have to think about what is the resiliency plan for the future.
So we have researchers from all fields here. And when I say all fields, STEM, social sciences, humanities. And it's also a tricky question to ask a general. I've learned to ask anybody in this type of field is to give some idea about what types of research you would love to see. And I think I'd like to push on the idea of interdisciplinary research between, for example, those colleagues in STEM and those of us who are in humanities and the social science. Are there some areas that might be on a wish list in general terms?
There are. So if you went to cybercom.mil, you'd see the 6 cyber challenges that we've put out and saying, hey, these are the 6 issues that we need assistance with. Everything from personas to taking a look at resilient architectures. These are the 6 things we'd ask you to do. And so they're hung today on there, available to all researchers and all take a look at. We find that those ways are really effective in being able to kind of say, hey, these are the things that we're working on right now that we'd be interested in your assistance on. We learned this early on in really kind of, I think, hacked the department that the Department of Defense had established in 2016 to look at challenges that maybe the private sector and academia could help us with.
And so there's the balance that I'm wondering about, because I think a lot of researchers may look towards you to sort of get the crystal ball. Where should we be looking sometimes? But there must be a real sense of symbiosis and synergy, is that when at our best universities doing great research, is we bring forward things that may spark new ideas in your departments as well. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to this idea of, it's really hard to predict the future, as Yogi Berra said, right? It's really difficult. And so what you need to do is you need to think about how do we become as agile as possible to deal with any type of contingency. And we get agility from working with a series of diverse partners. Academia is a really good example of that, because they have the focus, the understanding, the knowledge to be able to look at this and perhaps the depth that we never will.
And another question from the audience: how will NSA, U.S. Cybercom use AI to improve national security? We've heard a lot of concerns about how it could be unsettling for national security, but how will it improve national security?
So I think two examples that we could certainly point to that we're very interested in terms of how this can improve the the security of our networks, right? I talked about 15,000 different networks that we're responsible for. Think of all the daily logs that come with that of activity that we're trying to monitor for any type of anomalous behavior. The ability for large language models, AI, machine learning to take a look at that and spot that very quickly allows us to rapidly focus on that. I think the second way is think of our languages in terms of what we need to be able to cover as a global agency and the different dialects. If this can provide assistance to us, if this can provide obviously an ability to take a look at dialects that we don't have the human coverage right now, I think that's tremendously helpful for us.
I'm seeing 3 dots, which means that Brett is sending another question from the audience. But in the meantime, here's a question that is really important to me. I'm a college professor, and we have students who, I'm also a parent of 2 college students. Our kids have never seen Pearl Harbor, their own Pearl Harbor. They've never seen their own Berlin Wall or their own 9/11. And they're in such a different world than I grew up in the 80s, where there was a sense of urgency of a need to think about civic duty and a spirit of duty and honor. So I'd like it if you could just imagine I'm not here and you're talking to one of my brilliant students. What would you tell me? I've got the future right ahead of me, bright, bright, bright. What would you tell me about the importance of honor and duty and civic contribution, with the urgency that I think it needs to have as we're trying to preserve our democratic foundations?
I think I would begin with, when you're 22 years old, perhaps you don't know everything about the future, but you may know a certain amount that can help you make really wise choices. Here's what I learned. I've learned that there is just a tremendous power in service, something that is an ideal that is larger than yourself, that you can look back. Last night we had dinner with the Chancellor and several of his invited guests, and we had the discussion towards the end of the evening about their experiences in the service of the nation. I suspect that each one of those individuals that spoke had no idea at 22 that was going to be their experience. What they probably did understand is the fact that they were part of something bigger than themselves. And when you find something that allows you to be part of something that you're bigger than yourself, that it allows you to get up in the morning and say, boy, what I'm doing really matters, that's gold. And that's something that I think you will always treasure. And it doesn't have to be service necessarily in the military, but it could be the Peace Corps, Teach for America. It could be for 4 years, it could be for 40 years. But I think it's just that sense of being able to have something that truly means something that is larger than your own existence. And I've certainly taken that over my career.
I think this is a related question from the audience. As a technologist, I would like to find ways to contribute, but I'm not necessarily willing to give up my private sector career. What is the right way to engage?
So I think the right way to engage is, as I mentioned, there's a series of challenges that we're looking at that provide you this ability to look at a hard problem that we're trying to uncover, and then also look at a way upon which we can solve that. I think the other way is what Gil Herrera talked about this morning in terms of we have a tremendous challenge in our country right now trying to build the intellectual baseline in terms of what we're going to be able to use for the future. And so being able to encourage that, whether or not it's in Girls That Code, whether or not that's in a series of Gen Cyber camps, being able to provide that time with our young people, tremendously helpful. I was struck by Gil's statistics in terms of what the space program meant to our nation in terms of generating science, technology, engineering, and mathematics talent. I mean, that's the same type of talent we're going to need for our future.
I will not speak to the origins of this question. It is as follows. Will the Vikings win the Super Bowl next year?
Of course. Of course.
General,
thanks a lot, Holly.
So much.
It's great. Really appreciate it.